might be a little easier. Okay.
That's why I get paid the big bucks.
Good afternoon. My name is Karen Koehler. I'm here with the Stritmatter law firm, and I am very pleased to talk about the Charleena Lyles case, which has been on our community's mind for 4 years now. I am joined in this case first and foremost by our client, who's Commissioner Eric Watness. Eric Watness is a personal representative of the estate of Charleena Lyles, who was appointed by the court to bring this litigation on behalf of her family. Next to me is my co-counsel, Ed Moore, also my law firm. He has been with me since day one when we first started working on this case. Also joining us are 3 of our attorneys, one not present, Garth Jones. Also present are Melanie Nguyen, Lisa Benedetti, Farhad Sultani, who have been the legal team. We have other people that have worked on this case. They are not here today. This case was filed within a few months of Charleena's killing on June 18th, 2017. I had to go back and count how many years that was because it was so long ago. And what happened at that time when we filed the lawsuit was we ran into one hurdle after another. In fact, we ran into so many hurdles that the case was thrown out of court and dismissed, basically. We then had to appeal it, and thankfully, the appellate court reversed the lower court and sent the case back to be tried. It was supposed to be tried on February the 7th, 2022. Yesterday, after a marathon 13-and-a-half-hour mediation session at 10:30 p.m., this case settled. The civil case is a wrongful death case brought by the Charleena Lyles estate on behalf of her children against the City of Seattle officers Anderson and McNew. The terms of the settlement are $3.5 million and dismissal of the lawsuit completely. There is still an inquest that is set to occur. This does not impact the inquest at all. I just want to take a moment to just breathe and think about Charleena Lyles. I mean, we have a lot of adrenaline in this room from having gone through what we went through the past 4 years of litigation. And it's been a brutal, brutal case in many ways. It's been a very difficult case because of what happened and the status of the law. And the law is not friendly to people that are having mental health crises. It is not friendly. But we have changed the law through the Court of Appeals, and we have changed the course, hopefully, of her children in giving them some resources to protect them as they move into the future. But most of all, the settlement recognizes the value of Charleena Lyles' life.
Can you talk about the decision to settle, how that was reached, and are you happy with the terms that were reached?
So a mediation is confidential. We cannot talk to you about anything that occurred in the mediation. I can tell you that it was conducted by former Judge John Ehrlich. He is a very well-known, respected Superior Court judge for 20 years. Before that, had been in practice for 20 years. He, without lunch and without dinner, negotiated this mediation to settlement.
Can you say more about what you mean by the law is not friendly to people with mental health crises and how the law exactly was changed?
Yes. This case was very difficult because what happened was not a circumstance that our historic laws have really looked at in any kind of meaningful way. And so what happened, as we all know, is that Charleena Lyles thought that there had been a burglary in her house and called 911, and that officers, and I'll take you through the history that we have found in our litigation, which we allege and which is in the document that you have, which all comes from the Court of Appeals decision primarily. She thought that she had been burglarized and she called for 911. A young officer, very young officer, Officer Anderson, was assigned the call, burglary, person's not there, this is non-urgent. So those of you who have alarms or call after there's a burglary and no one's there, it's not urgent, they don't show up, the police don't show up right away, it's not, there's no one in the house threatening your life. He took the time, which was correct, to look and see what his computer was saying on his phone, on his car, and there was a warning that came up. It's called an officer alert. And it called his attention to an incident that had happened 10 days prior, 12 days prior, where she had had a mental health crisis, where she had to be de-escalated, where it had involved threats, making threatening statements and gestures to the police, but they were able to de-escalate it. She ended up going to jail, and mental health court, but was released days before this incident. So he knew that there was an officer safety caution and that there was a mental health problem involved. For that reason, he called for a second officer, who was Officer McNew. Officer McNew showed up. At this point, this is when the problems happened. Officer Anderson had read the whole incident report from the time before, and it was clear that there was a mental health problem. A total break in reality. There were discussions of morphing into a wolf, thinking the officers were members of the Ku Klux Klan, and other statements that were clearly not what you would think of a person that is of sound mind. From there, they then had some decisions to make. What do we do? How do we go in? How do we approach it? We alleged that they did not do any of that. They basically, one said to the other, what did you find? She had this other incident, described the morphing of the wolves. She clearly had some problems, and their whole plan was, as they were walking towards the building, was to basically, it says chuckle, and they did chuckle, just keep ourselves between her and the door. That was their plan. So they walk directly in there with that, but that was the plan. Two officers walking towards this, and she opens the door and lets them in. And describes what happens. They begin to walk through the apartment, but even their plan of keeping themselves between the door and her doesn't happen because they separate. And one officer gets sidetracked by her dirty meatloaf container in her kitchen, and it was a sloppy kitchen. We'll admit that. He's looking at the kitchen, and then there's some kind of a noise, and he notices that there's an interaction between Charleena and Officer Anderson. And then here's more that we don't know, but we will because there's going to be an inquest. We've also taken the depositions of these officers, so we know quite a lot in this case. We took it for hours. Officer Anderson says he was in the unit with the door closed behind him. The footage compared to the audio, that they're wearing audio, they didn't have cameras, which we synced together, showed that he was actually kind of in the hall. And there's pictures from that. That's what our allegations were. He was in the hall, not inside. Shooting from the hall in is what we could see. That's our allegations. You need to, look for yourselves. She was not told to drop her weapon. The first thing that happened was Officer McNew, when he realized that there was this thing going on, said, "Taser." And the reason is because the police have to carry a non-lethal, and Officer Anderson had chosen his non-lethal to be a taser. But against policies, he left it and had left it for more than a week in his locker back at the office.
Because the battery died.
Yeah. So when Officer McNew said taser, Officer Anderson said, "I don't have it." Okay. Time is passing when things like this happen, and you're thinking, "There's no taser. What are we gonna do next?" And they say, "Get back and shoot her." 7 times. Now that alone is bad, but what makes it even more horrifying to us is that her children are there. 3 of them. And this is not, maybe this whole room that we're in is as big as that place. It's small. And her 4-year-old is on the ground in the living room, which is on the other side of the kitchen counter. And her 1-year-old is within feet of her. And her 12-year-old is sleeping on the bunk on the other side of the wall in that bedroom when the shots ring out. So we filed a lawsuit for wrongful death and assault against the police and the city. And this case has now been resolved. But here's why the law was so difficult. When she lunged at the officers, the evidence is that she had a knife, potentially two,
According to the officers,
according to the officers.
the only remaining witness.
Yes. And that's what makes this case so difficult. If there had not been a knife, then the case is not legally as difficult. The knives were the problems. Of course, the knives were all over. Even CSI counted 10 knives, I think, on the counter of her kitchen. So certainly the officers hadn't secured the area to make sure it was safe before they wandered in there. The law is that if a person, the police can basically, I should let Ed talk to my microphone. I want you to hear it from him.
If he just stands next to you, we'll be able to hear it.
Okay. Because it's called a felony defense rule, and this is a Court of Appeals decision which saved this case and sent it back. And didn't say automatically, because what the city's position, officer's position was that because she had a knife, they were justified to shoot her. They didn't have to warn her, they could shoot her. And that's called the felony defense rule.
Yeah, there's actually two issues that really impact the emotional and mental issues that were going on with Ms. Lyles. One is, if you use federal law, U.S. constitutional law, the doctrine called qualified immunity basically provides police officers a fairly easy out of any civil lawsuit. All they have to say was, I was in threat, I was scared for my life, and they can use a gun and they can shoot people any day of the week and not be held responsible. We chose not to go to federal court. Instead, we went to state court and brought a negligence action, which allowed us to examine the acts of the officers leading up to it. So we were allowed in this case to make allegations that they didn't plan this properly. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. They didn't have a taser that was mandated by policy. They didn't use the taser in accordance with Seattle Police Department policy and training. They'd been trained on de-escalating knife attacks with tasers. It would have required an additional officer, and guess what? It would have required a taser, which Officer Anderson thought was doing just as fine in his locker with a dead battery as it would on its side. So that allowed us to maintain an action and not simply have it dismissed because the officers, the only remaining witnesses, says, well, she attacked us with knives. We were in fear of our lives. We had to shoot her. Now, mind you, the first thing out of Officer McNew's mouth was taser. Less lethal was the option that immediately sprang to his mind. They had batons. Lord knows I wish they would have broken her arm in 100 pieces and knocked the knife out with a baton.
And not killed her.
She'd be alive today. These children would have parents. So that's one aspect of how the law changed. The other important aspect is that, interesting enough, the City of Seattle Police Department has had a long-standing policy of de-escalation, trying to use less force or use the minimum amount of force required. The statistics show that a huge number of the people that are killed by police in this country every year happen to be the mentally ill or those with emotional or other problems. And what's happening is that we're getting police responses to a health crisis. It's been ignored for years. Attention has been focused on it in recent years, and we believe this case focuses it in our community. Would this have happened on Mercer Island? I doubt it. But in this instance, in Section 8 housing, These officers had not much of a plan, didn't follow the plan that they have, didn't follow policy, didn't follow training, didn't bring their mandated equipment with them, with which they could have de-escalated this case, and with any luck and skill, avoided this unnecessary and tragic death. So again, in the way we approach this case, under the state negligence law, the focus is on de-escalating. What should you have done? Not, oh, she had a knife, so we were fine to shoot her. What should you have done beforehand? Why didn't you follow policy? Why didn't you bring the necessary people? Why didn't you defuse this situation before you had to shoot a pregnant mother of 4 in front of 3 of her children? She barely weighed 100 pounds, sopping wet, 2 big strapping officers with batons, no taser. What option did they take? It's the only one they thought they had available to them, to shoot her. It means they showed up with no option other than to shoot her. That's what's important about this case. The law changed because the other side, again, thought we should be in federal court. We should be subject to this federal law, but that's not the case. They told us that there was no way to bring a negligence case under Washington law, despite the fact that there have been cases on the books for years that supported the claim that we have. Yet over and over they said you're supposed to be in federal court because guess what? They knew they were going to win in federal court. The judge made a bad mistake and dismissed our case. She said there's no duty. It doesn't matter. The appellate court examined the ruling from the lower court and decided without any hesitation, yes, the duty exists. Police officers cannot be negligent in the run-up to a contact with a citizen and then get off because they didn't plan the approach or carry it out appropriately. So that's the beauty. I think the real beauty of the law change is it's crystal clear in our law right now. Between this case and a couple of other cases decide the same. It's crystal clear. Officers have to stop and think about things as they approach citizens. They have to think about how their actions may precipitate injuries, and they have to take reasonable measures to avoid them and to de-escalate. So I'm trying to respond in a long-winded way to your question about mentally ill and the law change.
Super, super good.
And what does the settlement, or what does the settlement mean in terms of those broader conversations around how police respond to people of color and mentally ill people?
Well, the city, the city and the officers will say that you're dismissing the case and without prejudice, with prejudice and with, so, and no one ever, when you do that, they don't have to say we apologize. They don't have to say we're sorry. They don't have to say we agree we were wrong. In fact, you'll never hear that. I challenge the city or the officers to say we're sorry. We're sorry that we failed and that a life was lost and that these children have been impacted for the rest of their lives. We're sorry. That would make us nothing but the happiest, and that will never come. So the money is representative. It's representative of the magnitude of a loss, and it's acknowledgement, whether they apologize for it or not. And that's why we fight for it. That's all we can get, is the money for the children.
We expect them to continue to deny any responsibility for this tragic death, as they have from day one. What we know, what the city now knows, what Officer Anderson, Officer McNew, and our community knows, is that there's 3.5 million reasons why they were wrong. That's what this settlement really tells us. They can deny and deny, but this settlement tells us otherwise. This settlement tells us that they've had to think about these actions, that they've had to reconsider these actions. And we don't run the Seattle Police Department, but we certainly hope that they will recommit themselves to the policies of treating every citizen with dignity whether in Section 8 or on Mercer Island, treating the mentally ill with the same deference and even more as is appropriate than other citizens that are ensconced or that are in Seattle Police Department policy today. We hope the city recommits to those principles that are in those policies and that it continues to implement them to the best way possible, and that individual officers don't ignore these policies, respect them, and respect the people that they come in contact with.
Let me just add one more thing about the value of a settlement and the value of a jury's verdict, whichever should occur. And people will say, well, it's just money. But it's not just money. Is it? It's acknowledgement. And for the family, and specifically for the children, it's a restoration of dignity. Those children need to know that their mother should not have died. She did nothing that should have led to her death. She should have received compassion. She should have received resources. She should have received assistance. She should not have received 7 bullets in their presence.
And this thing could have been, they de-escalated a very similar event only 2 weeks before.
Yeah.
They did a good job. They
want-
talked her down.
I do want you to hear from Commissioner Eric Watness.
Thank you. I'm pretty much a figurehead in this process. I'm replaced one of the family members. Early on in the litigation, and I was asked to decide whether or not to keep counsel on or continue to look for other attorneys in this case. You've heard the passion that these people have demonstrated here today. They've demonstrated it completely from the get-go throughout this case. They've also demonstrated ingenious legal theories that most other people would have said are losers. But they took that risk and they followed it through, even past the case, when the case was dismissed and appealed. They held firm on that. And so I just want to say that this outcome, the benefit that will be delivered to the children in the future, bringing this matter to closure, is through their efforts and duties, and I want to thank them for doing that.
Yes.
Could you speak to the ramifications and timeline of the inquest?
That's a broad question, and so we have visiting with us some of the members of Charleena's family, both sides, maternal and paternal. The inquest is still off. The inquest is set, but there's not a date certain. There were 3, and it's number 3 on the priority list. It was going to occur sometime around this trial in February, but we don't know the exact date. The inquest procedures, so what happened was Dale Constantine changed the inquest, in part because of Charlena's case and several others that were pending at the time, and the calls of Corey Guillemette from the defenders and Charlena's cousins and sisters, in part changed the inquest procedures to make them more fair, because before it was just a one-way show. And then the city and the officer, the police union, and they appealed it. And the same judge that dismissed our case found that those rules that Count Constantine had implemented were not appropriate, were illegal. So that case went up, and the court struck down the lower court's decision and said that he had absolute power to enact those rules and to make the process more fair. And so at the same time our case came down, pretty much theirs followed. And so the process will continue. But there's a lot of, still it's not the same as a trial. The officers can attend or they don't have to, for example. But the evidence will be examined and more light will be shed during that process.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, question for you, and I don't know if Katrina is on here as well.
They're gonna come on.
They're gonna come on. Man, I'll be honest with you, man. You know, when this news came out this morning, so many people in our community that I know, including my mama, it was just a shout. People been saying Charleena's name for years, well before the protests, well before all of that. And the people who kept Charlena's name alive, y'all, the family, all these people kept Charlena's name alive. And it propelled to a higher level, even through the Seattle protest. Ma'am, what does this mean specifically to our community and the people who never forgot about Charleena? What does this day mean? What do you have to say to them? And what do you have to say to the tens of thousands of people who last summer uplifted her name, Charleena Lyles?
Well, I do want Katrina to address this later, and I want you to ask that question again, or we can lead with it. But I don't even know how to express it. It's just been a horrible case. It's been a horrible case, and it's been shameful that a city I love so much, that this happened, and that attempts were made to villainize her, and still are to this day. And I just think about someone so weak and so vulnerable. Her children, all she wanted to do was protect them. And they shot to kill her. They didn't shoot to wound her, they shot to kill her dead, and she was. So, yes, we were personally sanctioned for this case. I paid $24,000. We have bar complaints against us for saying that the police lied. And we just believe so deeply in this. And seeing all of the murals, we've all driven around to look at the murals, the protests with her signs. It has been the most humbling experience to be part of this.
I think it really means accountability. It means you can't do this without consequence. You can't negligently take lives in our community without a comeuppance. That's what it means, and that's the beauty of this day. The dollars can't replace. The dollars can't bring her back. That's just what we do in a civil case, and it's great for the kids' future. But the thing the community should see and should understand is there's accountability. Our courts actually work. Maybe they're not perfect. Nothing is, right? What's perfect? But our courts worked, gave Charleena's estate's lawyers the ability to redress what happened and focus a light on the city, focus a light on these officers, focus a light on the mentally ill, focus the light on those who have the least amongst us, focus on those who don't look like the majority skin color, and say to them, you're going to be held responsible if you do this to people in our community. We're not the only lawyers. Mr. Bible and other lawyers in our community are working on these cases as we speak, because the officers apparently still need some accountability, some focus, and some attention.
Yeah. I would like to move this meeting to our Zoom screen. And in attendance on the Zoom screen, we have numbers of people. I think I would like to start with Katrina Johnson. Katrina has been, I don't know her personally, I've only seen her a couple times, but I watch her all the time, and she has really been a force. So there's a lot of negative about this, a lot of negative about this case, but there's a lot of positive that's come out of it. And watching this family in action has been one of those things. So I don't know, Katrina, how to get Katrina on there, but can you please move Katrina? That's not Katrina. We need to have Katrina.
Excuse me, where will the audio come from? Is there a speaker where we could, the TV, okay.
Can you pin her?
Unmute her.
There she, yeah,
Unmute
you gotta
it.
unmute her.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
I don't think she's in her.
I just want to start with saying I am very pleased today that there is a financial settlement for Charleena's children, for my little cousins. And this dollar amount in no way brings Charleena back. It doesn't give them their mother back. It doesn't give Mr. Lyles his daughter back. We are forever traumatized by what happened on June 18, 2017. And this is just one step in the right direction for our family to begin the process of healing. We are not quite there yet. I still want criminal liability that has yet to happen for our family, for the officers who murdered my cousin. But today is a good day, and I'm very happy that there will be a financial settlement for my cousin's children, and we don't have to worry about trying to put together money for them. They're in good hands. Thank you, Mary, for all that you're doing, and you guys down there. We appreciate you and love you. I mean, I'm just so grateful to come together and continue to lift up Charleena's name. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without the help of community who has stood alongside us and elevating her name. And thank you to other impacted families all around the nation who are saying Charleena's name, because what happened to her should never happen. Thank you all.
Thank you. Is Domenico there? Can you go to the, well, let's go ahead and go ahead. We have Charles here. Charles, can you make a statement, please? And Charles is probably Mr.
Yes, I'd just like to thank the law firm for continually being strong and continually fighting the case, even though the judge had dropped it and all that. So I want to thank them for that. But I want to get the record straight. Charleena, police kicked her out. Her boyfriend kept jumping on her because he had kids. Kept jumping on her. Every time she saw the police, they come in there and take her. And those knives sitting on the counter was because she was waiting for the guy to come back. She didn't know that the people jump her and come back. You know, she was waiting for him. That's why those knives are actually, I think the police put them back there because that's what killed her. I don't know. I just want to confirm on working viciously and vigorously and helping us come to some type of monetarily settlement. And unlike Katrina, I would hope in some kind of way we could go after those police that they knew and didn't care about human life. You know, and they came in there and killed my daughter for nothing. While her baby was in her hand, they took the baby from her. That's what it said on the audio tape. I heard her telling the police, "Give me back my baby." But they took the baby out of her hand and just took it. And it's sad. You know, my grandkids, they think about their mother every day, especially Jazzy and Quan. You know, and it's just so sad that their mother, they won't have their mother in their life. You know, for the rest of their lives. You know, and it's just so sad. Her youngest grandkids, her youngest children don't even know that, don't even know about her existence. You know? And that's because of what the Seattle police did to our family. But I just, you know, nobody in the world could take their mother's place. But I'm just glad that the kids compensated for something, you know. And but that's not enough. Those two police need to be prosecuted, you know. That's about all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Is there one other guest before we go to Mary? We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Gotta come up with it, Laura.
My name is Paula Young, and I'm Charles' sister. Early in her life, I had the opportunity to kind of mentor, mother, care for her. And this is going to be an empty spot in all of our lives. And these children will never, ever experience even the slightest joy that we had with them. And we're just thankful that at least they have some kind of compensation for it. And yes, it should be positive.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak before we get to Mary?
Yes. Hello?
Yes, hello. You don't have.
Hi, I'm Tanya. I'm Tanya Isabel, Charlena's cousin. And I would just like for us as a family to say her name. We have carried that for the last 4 years, and we will continue to say her name until we get full justice. I appreciate the outcome today. I'm happy for her children, and just sending love to my family right now.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else before we get, I think that was it. Is there anyone else? All right, can you highlight Mary? So I would like to introduce Mary, and she has two special people with her, but Mary is Charles' sister, and she is the aunt of Charleena Lyles. She has the custody of the children. She lives in California. All the children have lived with Mary now for quite a while, and she's actually adopting the two youngest children. I don't know if that's even happened already, but she's been caring for all 4 children in her loving household, and the two older children are here today. I can see them. So, Mary, would you like to speak, or anybody? You don't have to speak.
Jennifer Klein would like to say something.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
I just want to say no amount of money will bring my mom back. Like, I appreciate the money. It helps us with, like, we won't get my mother's emotional support. So it helps us with financial support in order to try to make up for it. However, it still will not bring my mother back. And I still want to see the cop that did this prosecuted.
We do thank the law firm for sticking in there. Thank you. And Katrina, thank you.
Thank you.
Could he spell and say his name again?
We will give all
Thank you for everything you've done.
You want to ask a
Keep this
question?
movement going. I appreciate that.
All right, we have a question from Omari.
Katrina. It's Omari here. And
Hey, Amari.
how you doing? Saying her name, Charleena Lyles. And I'll just reach out to you. You know, it's a lot of people in community here, nationwide, but in community here, who've been uplifting Charleena's name for years now. And you know, last summer, tens of thousands of people took to the streets saying her name, Charleena Lyles. What you got to say to them today with the announcement of this settlement?
I just appreciate each and every person that was out there, willing to put their lives, their body, willing to be pepper sprayed, willing to fight for something bigger than themselves, willing to say my cousin's name. I am very, very appreciative to all of you all, and I thank you all. And we're not done yet. The struggle continues because we still want justice. So we want you guys to continue to support our family and continue to be there because we're not done until the 2 officers who murdered my cousin are held criminally liable. And as we do that, I just want to continue to urge community, continue to reach out to her, continue to keep her name alive, continue to say her name because it matters. And it gives us strength to keep going and get up and fight for Lena every single day. And so we appreciate you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending on the phone. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, yes.
Can you just talk a little bit, I mean, all of the kids are minors, correct? So is the money gonna be held in trust?
Yes.
Is it split between the four of them? How does that work?
There's the guardian is not here. There was a guardian ad litem, Karen Clark. There's a quote from her in your materials. She has represented those children also from the very beginning of the lawsuit, along with Commissioner Watness. He might have had to leave. There he is, still there. Commissioner Watness and Karen Clark. So either she or someone else appointed by the court specifically for this will have to come up with a plan for the children, and yes, it will involve probably trusts and other vehicles.
How old are the kids now?
Oh geez.
It was in
Mary, can you tell us the children's are the children's ages?
Deontay is 5, Zalea is 8, Quan is 15, and Jacqueline is 16.
We've not been we don't use their names in the press release. We just use them by initials.
Since he spoke today, are you giving out the son's name?
It depends. Is it okay if we use any of the names of the children particularly?
Q. This wants to be called Q.
Is that okay?
Just the letter Q.
Q.
Or wait.
He wants to be called Q.
Q Lyles. All right, Q it is.
What's your name, Jazzy?
Yeah.
She's
Jazzy J?
Several of the family members have talked about still wanting the police to be criminally prosecuted. Is there a plan for moving forward?
Well, the next step is the inquest. That's the next step.
Okay.
And I mean, that's the prosecutor's decision. That's the King County prosecuting attorney's decision whether to do so.
Yes.
Has your law firm been in touch with the families of Terry Kaver, for instance, anyone else who's been killed while having a mental health crisis, carrying a knife in the city of Seattle? Derek Hayden as well.
We have spoken to, there's a community of lawyers that do this work. It's not a huge group. It's a small group. So for example, Tommy Lee's lawyer, we were very involved with. Tommy Lee is, of course, one that they thought if he had a knife, it was a pencil and they shot him.
Settle that too.
Yes, they had to. But, he did not have, it was not a weapon, so they could, Anyway, yes, there's a small community of lawyers, very good lawyers. You have some great lawyers in the city. We mentioned some of them, James Bible, Ed Budge, us.
We all share notes from times to time. I mean, it's a constant struggle because the police are rarely, if ever, willing to accept responsibility. So our job is to put the focus on them and seek that responsibility, seek redress.
Let me just say, this happened 4 years ago. I gotta tell you, the climate was a lot more hostile. Again, I in particular called an officer a liar, and I paid $24,000 for that privilege. Times have changed in the past year because of the body cams. There was no body cam here. They weren't wearing them at that time. They had the audio from their vehicle, and we had a surveillance footage from the outside of the apartment building. That's the only way we could see that he was outside when we believe he was shooting. So things have changed, and for the better. Community awareness, community pressure.
Yes. To follow up on what Amari asked about and what it means to the community and what Katrina addressed, the climate has changed, but those protests and people repeatedly say her name, Charleena Lyles. That's resounded in our community, in our state, and across this country. And if you don't think that was in the minds of the city council when they decided to resolve this case, well, let me just suggest that it was absolutely on their minds, because they know our community needed to heal from this. And one way is to just acknowledge, and if we've got to force responsibility on them, we don't care. You got a role in this, stand up and own it. If you don't, we want to point it out. And the community, the marchers, the people who have said her name repeatedly over the years played a role in what happened in this settlement. They did. They absolutely did. We owe them a debt of gratitude also, as Katrina expressed on behalf of the family.
Any others?
Yeah, of the 3.5 million, how much is going to attorney fees?
Well, I can't tell you that, but use your imagination. I will tell you that, for example, Commissioner Watness, who's a court commissioner, he donated all of his time in this case. Yes.
The other two children, what will happen to them? Is there a plan for adoption? Because Mary is adopting, you said 2 of the children,
Yes.
right? 2 of the oldest?
The older two are too close, I mean, they're close to being
Adults.
so they can decide what they want to decide, but they're obviously living all together as a family and will continue to do so.
Oh, so she's adopting, I'm sorry, did I get that wrong? She's adopting the 2 youngest?
Yes, she's
Okay.
she's adopting the 2 youngest.
Okay.
Anything else?
Of the 4 kids, we know that Q's male, the 2 little ones, boys or girls?
The older one was a girl. The younger one who ended up on top of her was a boy.
And
Z
the
and
16-year-old
Z2.
girl too?
I'm sorry?
2 girls, 2 boys.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you all so much for coming on short notice. I didn't think we were going to have the energy to do this because, again, we finished at 10:30 last night. All of the whole legal team was there. It was epic. So thank you very much for honoring Charleena Lyles. And specifically, thank you very much every single family member who spoke today. Thank you so much.